Welcome to Act 3, the podcast where we explore how to thoughtfully shape the rest of our lives. I'm your host, Cara Gray. This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching service where I help executives and professionals plan their Act 3. For more information, stay tuned until the end. Hey there, listeners. Before we dive into today's episode, I've got some exciting news to share. We're all about celebrating life's big milestones here, and what's bigger than stepping into the golden years of your retirement? That's why I'm super excited to introduce our exclusive retirement swag collection. Picture this: stylish hoodies, sleek t-shirts, and classic baseball caps, each crafted to embody the spirit of retirement. It's not just about kicking back and relaxing. It's about embracing freedom, stepping into a new phase of being rewired, and thriving in your Act 3. Our collection celebrates these moments with designs that are minimal yet chic, modern yet timeless, perfect for you or as thoughtful gifts for your retired friends and family. And guess what? Shopping is just a click away. Visit goodmorningfreedom.myshopify.com to explore our range. Each piece tells a story, your story, of a life well lived and a future full of possibilities. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the link as well. But here's the catch. These are exclusive, limited time offerings, so make sure to grab your favorites before they're gone. Celebrate retirement in style with our retirement swag and let the world know that the best is yet to come. And now, on with the show. Today, I welcome Cynthia Round to the podcast. Cynthia is a brand strategist with focus on revitalizing legacy brands and building relevance to new audiences. She has led marketing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City's most visited tourist attraction, and United Way Worldwide, the largest publicly funded nonprofit in the world. Previously, she built global brands at P&G and Ogilvy Advertising and now advises cultural and nonprofit organizations. Now, Cynthia, I want to be clear that you are not retired by any stretch or definition of the word. You are in a cohort of women who were really trailblazers in their careers and have pivoted over the years to doing more rewarding, purposeful, and probably more interesting work as the years have gone by. I think that is both aspirational and inspirational for my audience. So I'm thrilled to have you as a guest. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Very good. So let's start with your career in advertising. That is and was very much a man's world. Tell me about that time in your life.
Well, I will say first, of course, I was slightly after the Mad Men phase, so I wasn't quite the complete trailblazer that America saw on that wonderful television series. But I started my advertising career on the client side at Procter and Gamble. Went right out of Oklahoma State University and landed very luckily. Very fortunate on my part. To get this great opportunity to work in what they called the advertising department, but it was really brand management and marketing. Um, the year that I started, I think there were 25 women out of about 350 total brand management marketing staff. And most of us had started that year. And most of us had BAs as opposed to MBAs, which most of our male colleagues had. And they were kind of experimenting with whether or not they could bring in people without MBAs. So anyway, I had a fantastic opportunity. And I will say that I loved every minute of it. I was frequently the only female in the room. I'm almost hesitant to use the word woman because I was all of 21 years old in my little puffy sleeve dresses from Oklahoma, but at any rate, but it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I had some great mentors. I had some men who were, I'm still in touch with some of these folks who were so instrumental and helpful in my career. But I also got wonderful opportunities. About 3 years into my experience, I observed that there had been no American females sent overseas. So I raised my hand and I said, I'm volunteering. I think it's about time. I'd love to get an international assignment. And in those days, that was before global branding, global marketing was the way to, a stellar marketing career. It was actually almost like taking myself off track. but I wanted to live abroad. And so it made sense to me to try to do this. So anyway, Proctor was wonderful to me, gave me that great opportunity. And then when I came back from Italy, by the
No,
way, I
Italy.
went to Italy. Yes, I went to Rome. I lived in Rome for 2 years to launch Pampers to the Italian market. So it was a pretty
Wow.
great gig, I have to say. That's when I fell in love with art too, but more on that subject later.
Yes.
Um, but then when I came back to the US, I jumped the fence from the client to the agency side. I'd actually had a very senior mentor at an ed agency. Since you're in Chicago, you may know the name Charlotte Beers. She was the
Oh,
president
yeah.
of TLK at the time, and then later J. Walter Thompson.
Yeah.
She was
She's a
the
legend.
first, she is a legend, and she was the first one to suggest to me, as this young brand marketing person, that I might want to think about an ad agency career someday. So she kind of planted that seed. And when I came back to the US after my Italian gig, I did join Ogilvy Advertising. And by a very big coincidence, about 3 years into it, Charlotte Beers became our chairman and CEO. So I found our paths crossed again. And at this point now, I was not her client, I was working for her. So, and I had, there were more women in the agency side, as you know. I mean, in
Yeah.
those early days, the advertising agency side was really a better way for females to kind of break in and get ahead, almost easier than on the client side. But I had a wonderful 15 years. And after Charlotte, who was a fantastic, boss and mentor, I also worked several years for Shelley Lazarus, who was the chairman of Ogilvy. So I've been really blessed to have great female, not only male and female mentors, even in those early days of advertising.
Wow. That's a great story. I love to hear all of that legacy talk. At some point along your agency journey, you became involved in pro bono work at the agency that then led to your involvement with United Way. Tell us that story.
Well, it actually involves another fantastic woman. One of my clients, I was a senior partner and executive, or senior partner, group director at Ogilvy, and one of my clients was AT&T, and there was a senior woman there named Marilyn Laurie, who was the head of all public relations and advertising at AT&T. And she was on the marketing. She was the chair of the marketing committee of the United Way of Tri-State here in the New York City area. And she called and said, "We need an ad agency. Wouldn't you love to be our ad agency, be our pro bono ad agency?" And of course, when your biggest client calls and asks you that, there's only one answer to that question, which is, "We would love to." And so my introduction to working on pro bono was really thanks to Marilyn Laurie asking for our help. At that time, though, I really got into it. I loved it so much. And I started thinking more and more about, you know, um, how to take brand strategy and the things we know in marketing about changing behavior, how we can adopt and use that, into more great nonprofits. One of the other great opportunities I had, I asked to manage the portfolio of pro bono clients because I thought we should be very strategic about which projects we were accepting. And as
Mhm.
you know, agencies love to do pro bono work because their staff love working on these causes. But it also often leads to brilliant creative. You can do some very wonderful showcase creative work that you can put on your creative reel. But one of our clients was the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. So another brilliant woman, Evelyn Lauder, I got to work with in founding that. And we created together the pink ribbon campaign, the pink lipstick, the cause marketing of selling the pink lipstick during the month of October, the tagline, "A Cure in Our Lifetime." And so these opportunities and experiences really hooked me. And I decided that I would then go do that full time. That was kind of when I pivoted and said, if brands like Nike and Starbucks can create a cult like following for a cup of coffee and a pair of running shoes, we ought to be able to change the world using those same strategies. And so I made a full time leap at that point then into the nonprofit sector. And as you said, ended up then actually at United Way Worldwide. And I did that for 12 years. I commuted from New York. I loved my job so much. I commuted from New York to DC every week for 12 years to help manage United Way Worldwide, which is in 40 countries, 1,700 local communities. And that was a great experience and opportunity.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. You must have loved it for that commute. Good heavens.
Yeah. Yes, my daughter was 6 when when I
Oh,
started going in for 12 years. She was 18 when I finished. She said, "Mom, just as I'm leaving home, you're coming home." But in fact, uh, I was only there 2 days a week. I was very early
Okay.
before telecommuting was a thing. They allowed me to do that. So I flew in, I was there 2 days, 1 overnight, and the rest of the time I was working from home. So it actually, as a working mother, it ended up being great because I was available to go to volleyball games and school meetings because I was actually already working from home, way before that was a thing.
A trailblazer there as well. So the next stopping point on your career was heading up marketing and external relations for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where you led efforts to make the museum less elite and more accessible. And as we touched on already, I know that art is a personal joy and passion for you. So tell me how amazing that gig was.
Well, as I said a moment ago, we were talking about my P&G assignment. I mean, I was from a small rural town in Oklahoma. So I'm from Ponca City, Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma State University. Um, Art was not a very big constant in my life. And then suddenly I find myself living in the greatest outdoor museum perhaps on the planet. Many people would say Paris vies for that. But I mean, Rome is just unparalleled, in the ruins and the fact that you're living in art all the time, living and walking in it. And so that's when really unleashed my passion for art. And so I loved my job at United Way Worldwide and thought that I would probably just continue doing that, to the end of my career. And then the Met came calling, and it's very hard. Sort of to have it was when your vocation and your avocation collide. It was sort of what happened. And I thought, this is too great an opportunity not to take. I really I love art so much, and it was the first time that the Met had brought in a consumer marketing specialist. They'd certainly had very savvy public relations people and managing it, but they hadn't really thought of themselves as a consumer brand, which is, of course, what my mission had been for the last 12 or 13 years. I was trying to help more nonprofits really think like consumer brands. Um, in order to not only attract the financial resources they need, but actually how to change behavior, because that's a
Yep.
lot of what marketing does, right? So anyway, the Met, in its wisdom, that the at the time the CEO and director realized that, however unintentionally it had happened, the Met was becoming, like so many cultural institutions, more and more elite, appealing to a kind of narrow audience of well educated and wealthier people, but the Met had a public mission. It was created 150 years ago to educate the public and enlighten the public about art. And so it was a logical thing for him to think, maybe we need to revisit that core purpose and mission, and try to figure out how we manage our brand to do that. So they brought me in, and what a joy it was. I mean, it was a very different environment than the corporate environments that I had worked in or even in the nonprofit sector. But it was an amazing opportunity to live and breathe and be in that art. I mean, my favorite thing, of course, was when I would work late at night and the museum was closed and I could just walk through the
Oh,
Greek and Roman galleries, on my own with those beautiful lights on that sculpture and just, be back in Rome, heartbeats. Um, but they were very serious about the assignment and the opportunity. And so to help the museum be more open and accessible was my mission. And so I was there for 3 years. We did a rebranding effort, which included sort of formalizing, taking the name from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is still the legal former name, but lifting up the Met, which was the nickname and what everyone called, making that the brand, as you've probably seen the logo and you know that
yeah.
it's now the brand, and just working with all of the departments to inspire and empower everyone in the museum to help make the museum more friendly, open, and accessible from whatever seat they sat in, whether that was, at retail or the security guards or the education department. So, um, again, a true, true labor of love and a job that I enjoyed so much.
Yeah, I can't imagine. What a fun job that would be and how rewarding as well. Let's pivot a little bit because I know that you have lots of thoughts about identity as you've been going through this career journey. The question of how do you think about yourself is constantly evolving for all of us, I think. What tips and advice do you have to manage this sense of identity as we all get older?
Well, it's a very good question, and I don't know if I have any real pearls of wisdom to share. I will say that for me, um, I was I never let my job define me. I mean, I never wanted to be defined by myself professionally. I've always, I've always been very involved and engaged with not only things of interest like art and the theater and opera, but also, I've been on a number of boards. Even when I was working in the nonprofit sector, I've also served on a number of boards. So my work has always just been one part of my identity, and
Mhm.
I got that really clearly, starkly when I moved to Italy. Because we Americans, we actually do tend to find, you meet someone new, and often the first question you ask is, "What do you do?" Right?
Yes.
That's like the question. That's kind of how we identify ourselves and each other. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. We won't go into all the psychological reasons why that may be. But in Europe and certainly in Italy, no one ever asked me that question. They said, "Who are you?" And they wanted to know who I was. And so that really stuck with me and helped me define. So I think on some level, the only real thing that I have followed and the advice I might offer is that no matter what stage of life you're at, it's who are you? Who are you? And don't let any one of your activities define you, whether whether it's work or any, or parenthood or any of those things. We're all of these things, right? It's all
Yeah.
about who our identity is. So I haven't found that mine has shifted. It has shifted more because my activity has changed and it's just kind of broadened. I just kind of keep broadening my definition of who I am and possibility. And I can't quite say how it is that this kind of young girl coming out of this rural s- community in Oklahoma um, actually had, big dreams and ambitions. But I think it's because we all do. And that I just never I never let my past get in the way of the future that I envisioned for myself. And that's the other thing. I think again is you haven't let it hold you back so far. Don't let it hold you back in your third act.
Yeah.
You're great, sure.
No, for sure. And I love too that you talked about how as you're getting older, you're broadening your identity rather than contracting. And that's something that's so important to do as we age, whether it's like continually learning things, continually meeting new people, continually having new experiencing, traveling. All of that is just, I think, the key, not only to
Absolutely agree.
identity. Yeah, not only to identity, but to just like healthy aging, quite honestly. So I also know you do quite a bit of mentoring, and you talked a little bit about your mentors as you were starting out in the advertising and marketing world. Tell me about the importance of mentoring and ways people can get involved if they're interested in doing mentoring themselves.
Well, you're right. I count myself really blessed at some of the mentors, and I mentioned them. I would never have had the life and career I had if there hadn't been several people at critical stages of my life who saw something in me and helped me along the way, whether that was advice or, uh, you know, uh, even just like literally educating me, in my
Yeah.
career and my job and my work and all of that. So I've always felt like I wanted to like play that forward. I mean, that we all have the opportunity to do that. I sort of formally mentor on the job all the time. I mean, I think, and many of us do that, right? You're kind of working with people. But several years ago, my husband developed a documentary film for Dartmouth College, which is his alma mater, about mentors. And because the thing that was interesting, they didn't interview the people who were high achievers about what they had accomplished. They interviewed them about who their mentors were and at Dartmouth and why those mentors had mattered to them. And it was of course, a great fundraising tool for the college and that. But that always really stuck with me because there was also a line in that one of the guys said, which was it's sort of the job of the mentee to stick to the mentor. And so I
Mm.
always built my career seeking mentors, but also looking the other way and seeking mentees. So I'm still in touch with people who worked for me 40 years ago. I'm still part of their lives, is still a part of their careers. I still get calls from people when they're making a career switch. They want to talk or they have a business challenge or some life thing, like I'm just one of those people that they know they could call on to talk to.
Oh,
That includes my daughter's friends. I mean, I kind of, my daughter is 29. She's got friends as they navigate different things, they will call and or we'll talk about. So, I mean, I have learned it's very important as a mentor. You only give advice when asked. I don't believe unsolicited advice is very
right.
helpful, but I do think that when someone calls and wants some guidance, I'm very open to that. So I do it both. I do that a lot of that formally on the job and then informally. But I'm also on the board of the Advertising Educational Foundation, and they have a mentor program. We were trying to diversify the ethnicity of people coming into the
Mhm.
advertising business. As you know, that's an
Yes.
ongoing challenge. And so we are we if those of you raise your hand, you're assigned. So I'm mentoring a young woman who's just graduated from Bowling Green, and so there are all kinds of formal programs like that I think you could often go back to your own alma mater. A lot
Mhm.
of them are doing mentoring programs now, right? So that's another piece of advice that I'd have. If you've been out of the job market long enough that you don't still maintain, sort of those formal ties, you can do it through universities. My church does a homework help program that's mentoring and teaching. We're mentoring and teaching English as a first language to the mothers while we're tutoring the kids in their homework. So there are just so many ways to be a mentor on very different levels that I think anyone who would like to do that can find those opportunities in their community. And I
Yeah.
encourage you to do it because it gives you so much. You get so much back from it, right?
Yeah, that's the key. Finally, you are a great example of redefining your Act 3 or whatever we want to call this. Rewired, Act 3, freedom phase, maybe. What advice do you have for women in particular about this time in their lives?
The thing I was thinking about that. And one of the things that I mentioned before is that I didn't ever let my work define me. It was kind of always my career is part of who I am. But there was something that one of my very first bosses said to me. It was about job satisfaction, career satisfaction. He said, there are 4 questions for asking career satisfaction. It's, am I learning and growing? Am I making a contribution? Is that contribution being acknowledged? And am I having any fun? And I have actually found those are also the life satisfaction questions, right?
Right.
I mean, those served me very well through my career. And really, all jesting aside, if I ever got a little bit restless in a job, if you ask those 4 questions, you can try to figure out what's out of kilter. Sometimes it's yes, you're contributing, and they appreciate you, but you have stopped learning and growing, and you need to kickstart that, right? Because you mentioned that earlier. Continuing to learn is like one of the most important ways that we
Yes.
stay vibrant and alive. And so I offer those 4 questions because I really think that they can serve us very well. And, I love your term, third act. I prefer it to retirement,
Yeah.
partly because if I've never been defined by my work, I'm certainly not going to be defined by stopping my work. That's not how I see myself. And so I don't see the relevance of that, right? It's just the continuation.
Yeah.
But the idea that there is multiple acts in our life.
Mhm.
So I think you've landed on a great concept and a great way to think about it. And it's very helpful to say this is my this is just my next act, and who do I want to be in this, and which of those 4 things do I need to pay the most attention to? Are they all firing on all pistons, or if I need to do something, do I need to go take a language lesson? i'm i'm
Yes.
i'm very i'm very happily on my, like, I think I'm on my 1400th day of duo at daily Italian lessons, because I'm trying to keep my Italian up. And there's so many ways, right, that we can continue to grow and expand, and importantly, to give back, and to make a difference, and to have fun.
Well, I love it. Cynthia, thank you so much for your time today. I think this is going to be a great episode for my audience to check out. Wonderful. Thank you
Oh, it's a pleasure talking to you. I hope there was something here that'll be useful to your listeners.
for sure. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching firm. I help executives and professionals plan the non-financial part of their retirement. like how to discover new purpose and how you want to spend your time. I offer a one-on-one coaching retirement blueprint package where we work together to discover some new avenues of exploration for your Act 3. This coaching is completely custom and will provide you with a ton of resources and support as you transition to this new stage of life. For all the details, please go to goodmorningfreedom.com/services.